Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from a critical examination. Well, that was a little bit of an ostentatious intro for what might end up being nothing. The short story is I'm doing this all on a dare from a friend and on a shoestring budget, so I guess you're just going to have to cope. Why would you listen to me? Well, I used to be a United States Navy surface warfare officer. I drove a warship that was about 20 days older than me at the time and had an annoying tendency of rusting through the hull in some very awkward places. After that, I drove a different ship that was significantly older than me, and along the way with both of them, I gathered up some significant experience with what does and does not work with military technology. Even before then, way back when I was a child, I was always kind of a tank and warship and general purpose military tech geek. So on this channel, I am going to take my knowledge, what little I have, and apply it to science fiction vessels and kind of take a realistic and experiential based look at them and see how well the designers actually did. On today, our first episode, we are going to take a look at the Venator class Star Destroyer from Star Wars. You might also know it as the Republic Attack Cruiser. No, cruisers and destroyers are not the same thing. They never have been. But an episode on the different types and classes of warships and how science fiction abuses those names would probably take a few hours to get through. The point is, this is the ubiquitous Star Destroyer from the Clone Wars series of animated shows from Disney. If you've seen one, a Venator probably showed up. And you probably knew it was a Venator based off of the peculiar double-bridge design that it was mounting above its superstructure. Unfortunately, this is the first significant flaw in this ship's design. They come at it from a good perspective, honestly. Backup bridges are a thing that have basically existed since ever. World War II battleships used to have a navigational bridge wrapped around a battle bridge that was contained inside of them. The navigational bridge, of course, had big, wide open windows and a fairly thin skin around them, and the battle bridge was literally contained in feet and feet of hardened steel. But that's kind of the point, is the navigation bridge was almost expendable, not really, but close enough, and the battle bridge was quite durable. In fact, they called it the citadel of the ship, going all the way back to castles in the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, the Venator bridges are basically identical, and they're right next to each other. So anything that is going to destroy one bridge would probably damage or destroy the other bridge. They could have put the secondary bridge in the hull or somewhere else on the ship, because when you get right down to it, having windows or on a spaceship is all well and good, but you can make do with view screens and sensors and whatnot else. Instead, they chose to hang both bridges off the top of the ship at basically the same location, barely separated by a void that you can't walk across. You have to go down some elevators and then walk across and then go up some elevators to get between the two bridges, and just leave them out there. Why would you do that? Unfortunately, the Venator design does not actually improve the longer you look at it. When you're considering the ship design, in front of the bridge and in front of the superstructure that's holding those two bridges up, there's this nice big wide plate of something across the spine or dorsal side of the ship that looks like it should be armor. Bad news, it's probably not. As it turns out, fully, 75% of the dorsal spine of the ship opens up and becomes a hangar bay. Okay, yeah, sure. Let's have an attack ship where the entire top part of it opens up and exposes hangar bays that are quite frankly voluminous and take up a massive amount of space inside of the ship. Like, so much space that they should be hanging things off the ceiling, but you never actually see them hanging things off the ceiling. I have no idea why the hangar bays are so large. But that's still not the problem. The problem is you're opening up the top of the ship. Like, a lot of the top of the ship. And worse, there's a ventral hangar port as well. So ships can launch out of the top, and like the Star Destroyers you probably know from the original trilogy movies, they can launch out of the bottom as well. but that means there's no actual keel to this ship. There's no single piece of structure that holds this entire ship together. It's almost literally two ships welded together and held together by a flight deck. Because when you get right down to it, the front part of the ship is two prongs, a garage door on top, and a flight deck underneath. It seems like that if you rammed one of these things too hard from underneath, it would just split in half like a matchstick. Unfortunately, as the man once said, but wait, there's more. In addition to the fighters hanging out in that very, very large hangar on its dorsal section, the Venator-class Star Destroyer is, of course, a Star Destroyer and mounts its own weapons. Specifically, it has 8 turrets of twin heavy turbolasers. Not too bad for a very large capital ship. The problem is, they're mounted in a broadside configuration. There's 4 on each side, and they're actually in these interesting little hardened positions that limit their rotational abilities. In fact, they're so limited that if the ship is driving directly at an enemy ship, only the forward 2 turrets can actually engage the enemy. So you've got 6 turrets that are just kind of hanging out. And this is an attack ship. This is a ship that pretty much every single captain and general and Jedi and whatever the heck else invariably drives directly at the enemy, bow first, throttle to the wall, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And they have 2 turrets that they can bring to bear out of 8. Even the original trilogy movie Star Destroyers were better configured for that kind of attack simply because the angle of their wedge went all the way up to the stern. So, as you went further aft, the turrets towards the bow of the ship were lower than the turrets more aft on the ship. On the Venator, as it turns out, the turrets are all mounted on basically the same level, and they can't shoot over each other. I mean, this is something we figured out back in World War I even. Not only does mounting staggered turrets, where one is above and behind the other, allow you to rotate the turrets past each other, but that means they can also both engage targets that they would not otherwise be able to engage if they were mounted next to each other on the same level. So, yes, it's an attack ship that should be used in a broadside configuration that no one actually ever does. Yay? Okay. To be honest, the fanboys will probably be up in arms at this point about me talking dirty things about one of the most popular ships in the current Star Wars universe. And a lot of them consider the things that I'm considering to be downchecks to be benefits to the ship, and they are, like I said, kind of right and mostly wrong. They're right. Double bridges are useful. In case one gets shot off, you've still got a backup. Why would you ever put the backup right next to the primary? Come on. If it's a backup, it should be somewhere else, in case whatever took out the primary takes you out too. And they're right. That massive garage door on its dorsal section does allow for launching a lot of fighters all at once. But there are other ships in the universe that accomplish the same basic goal in a much better way, and we can talk about them if I ever do another episode. However, as the sequel trilogy showed us, giving someone the opportunity to fly through your hangar section and drop a few torpedoes is a really, really bad idea. And that's just a massive opening begging for someone to drop into the dorsal section, drop a few aforementioned torpedoes, and pop out that ventral hole and call it a day. You're down one Venator. And yeah, I mean, if anyone actually ever used these ships in a proper ship-of-the-line configuration where they line up across from the bad guys and start wailing away with their 4 turrets, they'd probably lay down a hell of a lot of hurt. It's a darn shame that the Galactic Republic can't find decent captains, though. I suppose if I keep doing these, I'll have to come up with some sort of scoring structure for the ships I talk about. The takeaway is that the designers did an acceptable job of creating an aesthetic precursor of the original series Star Destroyers. After all, the Venator basically grows up and becomes a Victory-class Star Destroyer in the original trilogy. And you could even go so far as to say that the double bridges kind of echo back to the weird double shield spheres that the Victories had above their single primary bridge structure. So, yes, congratulations. You made a pretty looking ship. Really, though, it's basically a mobile plot armor and plot gun device. It works because the writers say it has to work. And it totally works because the Jedi love them for whatever reason. They're fast enough, I guess. But realistically, there could have been just a few little tweaks. Mostly stacking the turrets so they can shoot past each other when they're shooting directly ahead. And maybe putting the secondary bridge underneath or at the bow or somewhere else aside from really right next to each other. The hangar situation, honest to God, I have no idea why it has a port hangar bay, a starboard hangar bay, a ventral hangar bay, and then a massive freaking dorsal hangar slot. Pick one. You don't need all of them. And really, launching fighters fast is not that big of a deal in this universe anyways, especially with how many anti-fighter turrets it has on it already. So, yes. Stylistically, it works. Realistically, eh. And that's all I've got to say. Have a good one.